really like forging a career of my own in that respect, until I met the man I ended up marrying. And then it all kind of goes downhill from there.
Discover Phenomenal are on a mission to help everyone we meet not die with their melody still inside them. Over the coming years, we're going to interview those individuals that have grown through adversity and are now using that experience to share back so that others have a community of like-minded people that have been through similar situations. Join us on this coming interview and see what you can take away from it.
Let's go.
Okay, we're jumping right in. God, and so I grew up in Los Angeles and I had a pretty normal childhood, except for the fact that my mother and father were both in the TV and film industry. My mom is Dee Wallace from E.T. and Cujo and The Howling. My dad was also an actor and director. And everything in my life up until I turned 6 years old was pretty amazing. I had a really loving home and it was pretty wonderful. And then my whole world changed when I walked in and found my dad dead on the floor from a heart attack. And everything just kind of stopped. My mom flew home from the film shoot that she was on. We kind of rallied together as a family and how you deal with a tragedy like that. But that was the first real experience that I had with what was going to become one of my longest stemming beliefs in my life was fear of abandonment. And when I love someone, they die. Despite that, I continued on with life, and my mom and I became really, really close and the best of friends. And I grew up, started to heal from that. Not that you ever get over it, but heal from it. And then in my graduating year of high school, when I was 18, my high school sweetheart was killed in a car accident. So it ripped that wound for me wide freaking open again. And here I was reliving the when I love someone, they die fear of abandonment. And that's kind of been my thing that I've had to overcome in my entire life. I went on to start acting and then directing and was really like forging a career of my own in that respect, until I met the man I ended up marrying. And then it all kind of goes downhill from there.
Got you. So, and just because 6 years old, 18 years old, two massive significant moments in your life.
Yeah.
And what I like to talk about, or sorry, not what I like to talk about, what I've found is incredible is how do we overcome adversity? How do we take these life setbacks, these moments of like where life just knocks you to the ground? And how do you keep going after that? How do you kind of use that and go, this is not defining me. How do I push through? So maybe not so much around 6 years old, because we're still in that, we're not in our prefrontal cortex yet. Our prefrontal cortex hasn't developed. We're still in that kind of like just fight or flight kind of phase. But at 18 years old, when that significant thing happened, can you recall back to the mindset that you were into? And how did you kind of like, what happened with that event? How did you deal with it? And how did you then kind of show up after that?
Yeah, I remember very clearly having the thought, this isn't supposed to happen to someone. You're not supposed to have to lose your father at 6 and your boyfriend by the time you turn 18. Like I thought I had paid my dues in the grief department. And the universe said, haha, no, we've got some more for you. And I had a lot of lessons come out of that experience. I started drinking because it was in my early college days, and it became a problem to where I was drinking 4 to 5 nights a week and getting pretty belligerent. And it's because of that experience that whenever I go through anything traumatic or emotional, or I'm just not me, and I'm moving through those experiences, I won't drink at all. I don't introduce any substances. I'm very just like gym, eating well, meditating, like very like the things that I know are going to make my mental health stronger. And it's because of that experience that I really hold true to that rule.
And if we were to just to go forward, so if we were to take the 18-year-old, how was kind of day-to-day life showing up? So the 4 to 5 nights a week of drinking, but how would you show up? Were you kind of still successful in school? Were you putting on this facade of everything's okay? Where were you at in kind of like day-to-day life?
I've always done well in school without working as hard as I could. Like I could have done better. But I always had A's and B's. But the first year of college, which was right at his death, I ended up failing out of 2 classes, and which was so not like me. But there were days, not even because of the drinking, that I just couldn't get out of bed in the morning. I was just so sad. And it was like it didn't make sense to move forward in a world where stuff like that just happens.
Mm.
And it took a few months for me to really get back to feeling like myself. And once I did that, it was very clear that I was like, I never want to go back to that place again.
And with that being said, then back to that place again. So were you able to communicate this to people that potentially are worried about you, say that family, friends, things like that? Or was it, did you go internal? How did you kind of, how was that showing up? So how did you, firstly, those days when you failed those 2 classes and you were in bed, how did you show up then? Was it, I'm going to go inward and deal with this processes internally, or you were kind of vocalizing it to those significant people around you?
I mean, my mom knew I was going through it. She knew I was sad. I don't think she knew how bad the drinking was because I wasn't living at home at the time when I was at
Yeah.
school. Um, my really close girlfriends could see it starting to become destructive. And it's hard when you're 18, 19 and everybody's drinking at all the college parties anyways. It's hard to differentiate what's partying and what's unhealthy.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, my really close circle knew that I was not okay.
And did you back over, because obviously you mentioned that you were in the acting world, you're in that kind of like the kind of like the show world. Were you able to clearly articulate it? Were you able to kind of get the words out of this is where I'm at, I'm processing these emotions, or was it just kind of showing up and drinking, and your close friends saw it, but you didn't know how to communicate it, or were you able to kind of dive into it and analyze it and share that?
I think I knew how to communicate it. I just didn't want to. At the
Got you.
time, I wasn't ready to walk through it to heal. And then once I did, it was quite literally like a decision, and it was like, oh, this is not who I am. Let's start to make better choices. And that's kind of what grief is. It's such a weird thing that we as humans experience to deal with in different ways. And there are different stages of it, and it's not always so linear to move through it and get past it.
Um, you might hate me for this question, but are you happy for us to explore that a little bit further by what you mean by that? Because the reason I'm asking that question is because it's this idea of everybody deals with things differently, but it when people get rocked in that way, when you're on a metaphorical sense, you're on your back and you've been rocked by life. It's where does your mind go? Where does the depths of our mind go? And how do we see through that? How do we kind of still find purpose? So that kind of brings me on to my next question, which is at 18 years old, how did you keep that focus? How did you get yourself out of it? I'm not going to be in this place forever. How did you kind of get through that stage of what you were going through?
Well, I think at that time I really masked it with alcohol and with, you know, going out and being around my friends and constantly not being alone. Back to the fear of abandonment thing. And I think oftentimes people really beat themselves up because they're like, oh, I should be over this by now, or oh, I should have been healed by now, or oh, I should be farther along, or yesterday I felt great and now I feel like I'm 5 steps back. And that's what I mean by it's not linear. People have to remember that there are times where you'll be great for a month and then out of nowhere feel like you have to break down and cry because you're grieving something. And it's just how it happens. Everyone's different. Everyone handles it differently. So I think when I was 18 and going through all that, I didn't handle it well or get through it well, although what is well when we're discussing stuff like this. But there was one moment where I was like, I can't keep going at this rate because it's becoming destructive to myself and me as a person. And that wasn't something I was willing to compromise on.
it's I'm fascinated by the fact you just kind of threw that lovely caveat in around what is well. And we're in, I mean, speaking massive generalities here, but we're in such a world now where it's almost this fear to say it's not okay, or how do I kind of present this up now? Whereas like, it's such an interesting concept. So in terms of like, because 18 years old, how did you talk about that to people? Did you just come out with say, like, yo, I'm not sure what I'm going through, I'm feeling this and this, or how did you actually communicate that to friends and actually clearly share kind of what you were going through?
Well, it was a weird situation because the accident that happened that took my high school sweetheart's life, there was also two other boys in the car at the time. One didn't live and one did, and we all went to the same high school. So I was still hanging out with all of my friends from high school. So we were all kind of going through this very tragic thing together. And so in that respect, it didn't really need to be communicated. Everybody knew what I was going through. I was kind of, you know, his girlfriend that was left behind. And that in ways made it easier because I didn't have to explain and people weren't judging me. They knew what I was going through. But in a way, it made it harder because every person I looked at reminded me of these people that were no longer here. So I think, I've been in therapy since my dad passed on and off, and I know how to communicate what I'm going through and what I'm feeling. It was more about me as Gabrielle needing to make that decision of this isn't okay anymore. And I feel that whenever we grieve something or go through something traumatic, we eventually get to a fork in the road and we have to make a choice. And that choice is either to be a victim to what is happening to us or to not let that traumatic thing really define us and say, okay, this happened to me and it's part of my story, but it's not me. And choose the road to steer away from being a victim around it. Because inevitably, if you stay in that victim mentality, it's only going to create more strain on your life. You're never going to be able to fully move forward if you are constantly carrying that with you.
This is like the self-fulfilling prophecy, and actually kind of, and I appreciate this is just throwing this question straight onto you, and that it might be hard to answer for someone listening where this is a concept that they can't even grasp, that something's rocked them, something's happened, maybe similar, maybe not. It's not about a comparative, but what it is I'm stuck and I can't get out of it. Is there either in a book or a podcast or a tip or trick that you can give away that can help somebody not snap out of it, but like kind of start the process, plant the right seed in their mind of, okay, I'm going through this doesn't define me, that baby step, that initial step to get going, get out of it? Or how would you answer something like that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the book, it's actually in the epilogue because I didn't figure it out until I came back home and continued my own healing journey. But this whole time that I was on my Europe trip, which we haven't even gotten to, but
Yeah.
I
Series 2 next week.
right. But I was looking for a way to love myself and figure out how, everybody always says it's so important to love yourself. Loving yourself is the most important thing. And I was sitting there going, okay, I'm ready to do that. Can anyone tell me how? And nobody could give me a clear answer. So I eventually found it and wrote about it. And it's called the Self-Love Cocktail. And what it is you sit down and write a list of things that you can give your soul that make you happy. So not something that you need from a significant other or any person in your life, only things that you can give yourself that truly make you happy. So for me, that was creating, writing, dancing, meditating, going to the gym, eating well. And I stuck that list on my mirror and I was like, look, because it was when I was really depressed. And I was like, if I can give myself one of these things a day, then I've earned getting back in bed and binging my TV show and being sad. And then it became, if I can give two of these things to myself a day.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
weeks and weeks and weeks of doing that, you start to not need to get back in bed and feel bad because you are loving yourself. You are giving your soul the things it loves. And when we think about wanting to make someone else feel love, whether it's a significant other or mother, daughter, or brother, sister, we do things that make them experience love, things that make their soul happy. So when we're thinking about self-love, why would we not do that for ourselves?
So the reason I'm smiling, the reason I love that is because something that I discovered, that I used on myself to start with, and then I now train, which is it's like a Venn diagram full of three things, right? So three Venn diagrams, and it's joy, fulfillment, and a sense of accomplishment, right? So
Mm.
fulfillment and a sense of accomplishment are slightly different. And the reason the two are at the top of joy and fulfillment is, okay, what do I want to get excited about today, right? What do I want to start releasing dopamine around? The excitement, the little goals, the little things that bring me joy.
Yeah.
And throughout the pandemic, right? So from even though I don't like that word, but because it's whatever, it's so heavily used now. But if you take statistics from March 19 to March 2020, the most 52% of all Google searches were how to find more joy in my life.
Yeah.
So it's what a lot of people. I'm not saying that happiness is the wrong word. It's all these words mean to you. It's too subjective. But what I think a lot of people are doing is, how do I find more joy? How do I get excited about things again? How do I, even though the world has completely changed around me, or I feel trapped, how do I find my joy? And you said it so well, is not how do I love other people? How do I love myself? And then the
Yeah.
reason I do the fulfillment, and the way I describe it, is that, okay, what do I want to get excited about waking up for tomorrow? What do I want to go to bed knowing that I've achieved? What do I want to get fulfilled about? What do I want to go to bed going, oh man, I did that? And it could be so minor but big to you. It could be anything. Like, I want to bake some cinnamon rolls. I want to do that recipe again. I want to run that 5K. I want whatever. I want to paint that picture. I want to take that photo.
Yeah.
What is your level of fulfillment? And then there's a wonderful thing of what I talk about with this, and there's a saying, which is, you can't compete with me. I want you to win too. And it's this idea that we're not in competition with people. We're not trying to compete with that person down the road. We're not trying to do this. It's, where are you at? Who are you? What lights you up? And then the third thing is accomplishments. And this is those little goals. It's like you've just said here, right? What can I do one thing a day that kind of
Yeah.
just gives me that feeling of love? And, oh man, I did that. And even that, for some people, it could be getting out of bed. That could be having a shower. That could be reading a book. For other people, it might be landing that job, asking that girl or guy out. It could be anything. And that's why you have those three quadrants. And this is how you kind of set this kind of thing for your life, of just these little wins every single day. So it's so cool that you jumped onto now. With complete
Yeah, I
respect
love
to the
that.
fact, yeah, with complete respect to the fact we've got 2 minutes of your time left. I just wanted to just kind of wrap it up, and well, first I'm going to invite you to a second series, second episode, but because we haven't actually talked about the book, right? We haven't talked about what happened with the Europe trip, how that even came about. We've completely
It's
gone
okay.
off there.
We've important stuff.
Important stuff. But the kind of final question is, I had a question here that I was going to ask at the start, but we're kind of actually still technically in introduction. The quick fire question I had for you, which is, what is the scariest thing about releasing a book?
Oh my God. Well, for me, Eat, Pray, FML is so personal. So to give everybody a quick idea of what it is, I was married for almost 2 years, found out my husband was having an affair with a 19-year-old for 6 months. I filed for divorce and left. Shortly after that, I met a guy and we fell madly in love with each other and had this whirlwind romance. And he invited me on a month-long trip to Italy. 48 hours before we were getting on the plane, he told me he needed to go by himself. And I was absolutely devastated, broke my heart like my ex-husband never could have done. And I had a decision to make, and that was either stay at home heartbroken or go travel Europe for a month by myself. So I did 6 countries solo with a backpack over the month and wrote a book about it. So for me, the scariest part of releasing it was just the fear of judgment. Like, oh my God, so many people are about to know so many intimate personal details, not only about the things that have happened in my life, but about my inner thoughts and, my process to get through all of those, and a lot of healing through some pretty heavy stuff. And I remember when my mom first read the rough draft, she was like, God, Gabrielle, are you sure you don't want to change your name or like take out one of the guys you slept with? And I looked at her, I was like, Mom, it's got to be real and raw and authentic. And I have to put it all out there if I'm going to do it. And if people are going to judge me, then so what? And, of course, with any art, it's subjective. So are there 4 to 5% reviews of people absolutely hating it? Of course. But there's 95% that are saying it changed their life and got them out of a horrible relationship or helped them heal from something awful they've gone through in their life or gave them the strength to leave their marriage. So it far outweighs any of the fear of judgment, knowing how many people around the world it's been able to help heal.
So for everyone listening, Gabrielle and I we actually spoke about this prior to the call, right? And the power of what this kind of stuff does. What I didn't tell you before the call, and what I'm slowly moving towards, is the reason what you've just said there. There's 5% of people that slate the book, but then there's 95% of people that don't, right? They love it. And then what we haven't talked about there, which it's an hour's conversation in its own right, is who are the people that we've planted the seed of thought of, I deserve more, I can become more. And that's what it's all about, right? It's about that. And the reason I'm sharing this is because one of the things that I do is I do storytelling for teenagers in countries that don't have an infrastructure like we do in the first world country. So we're working with three charities in South Africa at the moment, especially around younger girls, teenagers.
Oh, that's amazing.
Of how do they tell their inner story? How do they firstly understand it? How do they set visions, missions for themselves? And how can they think that their life can be greater than what they see in their surroundings, right? And the reason I'm saying this is because what people like you are doing inadvertently or advertently or directly or indirectly is that you're planting the seed of how far can I go? I'm not my past. I'm not defined by if you call me angry or if you say I'm this or I'm that. You don't define me, I do. And one thing I'm hearing is that you're trying to help people shift that internal narrative. Just because this past has happened does not define who you are. And that's why I'm like, this is an hour right here, because it's like, how do you undo the conditioning of your parents? And I'm not saying that our parents' conditions in a good or bad way. I'm just saying that that's their way of doing things, which may have worked 20, 30, 40 years ago, but it might not work now. And that's why there's like a spin-off to the spin-off, but we've hit time. And I just wanted to say, any final thoughts that you usually sign out with, anything that you feel is worth sharing that you don't feel I've covered, or how do you feel like we should end this?
Yeah, I mean, if people want to check out the book, it's exclusively on Amazon or on my website, which is eatprayfml.com. The second sequel is coming out very soon. And we have a podcast, FML Talk, where we talk about all things, trauma, divorce, relationships, healing, abandonment. And it's really become a safe space for so many people to be able to heal and grow on their own journeys. And for anybody that's going through any type of grief or heartbreak or anything that's challenging in their life, I can promise you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it is more beautiful than you could ever imagine. So keep going.
There she is. Incredible. Thank you so much for 30 minutes of your time. And
You're so welcome.
Well, hopefully there's a second series. Hopefully there's a follow-on. If not, thank you so much for this time. And I really, really wish you all the best. Although it's still not a confirmed date, I really wish you all the best with this second book release. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And I'm happy to come back anytime.
Speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.